Ask him to put that on the screen, please. Okay.
Through you, Mayor Clark, that motion will be handled under Council Referral Item 1.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Yes, indeed, it will. We have no consent agenda items today or board reports or council refer. Sorry, there's one council referral, which was just referenced, which I guess would actually make it a referral. And maybe, Madam Deputy Clerk, would you mind introducing that?
Through you, Mayor Clark, this was a council referral, and I believe Mr. Merkley is connected and can introduce the report.
Mr. Merkley, are you indeed connected?
Mayor Clark, I am. Thank you.
In ways I'm sure I don't even want to know.
So the purpose of this report is to respond to an outstanding referral from Council from September 16, 2019, regarding options for the naming of the park currently under construction in West Orillia. Due to the confidentiality surrounding identified individuals, a discussion related to option 1 occurred in closed session. This report addresses further naming options. As per City Policy 7181, renaming parks, the parks naming process is led by the Recreation Advisory Committee. Advertisements were placed on the city's website and in the city's bulletin board in Orillia Today in November and December of 2019, inviting public input and submissions for naming the park. RAC received 4 submissions as a result of the advertising, as well as 3 members of RAC provided submissions. Overall, over 40 separate names were considered. 3 names were shortlisted and further discussed at the February 26, 2020 RAC meeting. These included 2 named after individuals and Monarch Park. Direction was provided to staff at the meeting to finalize a report for RAC to consider at their March 23, 2020 meeting. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all City Advisory Committee meetings have been suspended, and this final report reviewed by the Recreation Advisory Committee has not occurred. However, the construction of the park is nearing the point where signage will need to be designed and ordered. In order to complete this task, a name for this park is required at this time. The 2 most favorable submissions are presented in the report in order of preference and are 1, after an individual is set out in the closed session portion of the meeting, and 2, Monarch Park. Staff have also included an option for Orion Park, as the parkland is located on Orion Boulevard, and it is common that parks be named after the street that they are located on. Staff are seeking direction from Council with respect to a name for the new park on Orion Boulevard in West Orillia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ray. And if it's okay, I think we'll put the motion on the floor. Ask for a mover a seconder, then I will entertain discussion. I will entertaining discussion. That this committee recommends to Council that further to the report RAC 2002 dated July 14th from the Recreation Advisory Committee, affectionately known as RAC, the park located at 3050 Orion Boulevard, currently referred to as West Orillia Park, be named as set out in option 1 of confidential report RAC 2001. Anyway, that's as there a mover and a seconder to put that closed session resolution on, or proposed resolution on the floor. Thank you. Moved by Mason, seconded by Pat. And understanding that part of this is still governed kind of by confidentiality, I will ask if there is any further discussion, questions, or comments. Thank you, Megan. In that case, I will now call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And thank you, one, and thank you all. And thank you, Mr. Merkley. We are ever onward and ever upward into departmental reports. We have from our Treasury Department a report on the financial statements and audit from 2019. Seems like a long time ago now, but still need to tie those things off. And I believe that we have Ms. Jazz Radigan, our Manager of Accounting Services, with us from our Treasury Department to introduce this and to introduce our special guest today. Jazz?
Thank you. For you, Mayor Clark and members of council, the annual audited financial statements summarize the financial information for the year ended December 31st, 2019. The statements combine information from the operating budgets, capital budgets, reserves, as well as boards and agencies. There are 3 attachments to the report. Schedule A and B provide the communication of audit results from our auditors, BDO. Schedule C represents the draft consolidated financial statements prepared by city staff and audited by BDO. The financial statements illustrate the city's financial performance and financial position and how it has changed over time. I'd like to introduce you to Andrea Noss, our Senior Manager with BDO, and Giselle Bodkins, Partner with BDO. I'll turn it over to them, and they will be presenting the communication of the audit results.
Thank you for that, Jazz, and welcome very much, Andrea and Giselle. And with that being said, Andrea, it sounds as though you're taking the lead, I believe. So I'll let you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, we will start with the audit communication Schedule A, which is our report to Mayor and Council. And the bulk of it starts on page 25 of 91, which discusses the status of the audit. As the day of the final report, we have substantially completed our audit, and there are just a couple outstanding items that we have to finish. We have to perform the audit right up until today. So there are a couple of items we have to finish up today. We now have all of the outstanding legal confirmations. I'm just working to get an update to make sure nothing has changed on those as of today. The financial statements are here in the package for your approval. We confirm that we are independent of the City of Orillia. We have our materiality, which was communicated in our planning report at 1.9 million, and that has not changed. For our audit findings, we have to look at certain areas of the audit in terms of where we concentrate our procedures, and that starts with the management override of controls, and that we have to design our audit approach to look at journal entries that were recorded in the general ledger and any other adjustments made in the preparation of the financial statements. And all of our testing showed that they were appropriate, everything that was done in the course of the audit. The next page talks about the sale of the Orillia Power Distribution Corporation, which is also disclosed in the financial statements. Adjusted and unadjusted differences. We did not find any unadjusted differences to report to you. Management representations on the next page. That summarized in Appendix C. Management provides us with a lot of different representations through the course of the audit, and we get them to sign a letter just to formalize that. Every year we also have to have our fraud discussion as well, in that we open up the floor for any concerns in regards to fraud. Okay. Internal control matters. We look at your internal controls during the course of the audit to see if there are any significant deficiencies, and we did not identify any. And then the next couple of pages are just a list of communications that we have. And you can see that most of them are none, and that we didn't, no matters of non-compliance, no differences of opinion or anything like that. Our subsequent events work. You'll notice that there's disclosure in the financial statements in regards to COVID-19. And then if I move into Appendix A, the draft auditor's report, this is our report on the results of the audit that's attached to the financial statements. And it's what's known as a clean audit opinion, in that we didn't find any material misstatements during the course of our audit. And that's the same as has been in prior years. Appendix B is our summary of unadjusted differences. There's the impact of last year's item being reversed, but no items were identified this year. And then finally, our management representation letter is in Appendix C. Did anybody have any questions?
Thank you for that, Andrea. I know a few of us met with you and Giselle a week or so ago as part of the liaison meeting, but for those folks and for anybody else, I will open the floor for questions or comments, and I'll start with Tim. Forgive our informality today.
Thank you, Steve. You paused after you were talking about fraud, as if you were looking for questions at that time. So I apologize if I didn't jump in at the right time here. But under the fraud section, you have listed as a significant risk the position of management. Is that a generic risk, or are there actually things that can be done or programs you can put in place, or is that just a fact of life in all organizations, and so therefore you kind of work through it the way you have?
Tim, I can say that is in every audit file.
Yeah, it's inherent. So it's an inherent risk in every audit. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you both. Further questions, comments? In that case, Tim, go ahead.
Sorry, do we ask Jim or Jazz questions about the financial statements as well now, or is that later?
My sense as chair is that would be appropriate.
Okay, if I could just ask a question about, I think it's the last slide, or the second last slide. It's the notes on to the consolidated financial statements, number 23. And it's more of a question of just how to read this. Under revenue, we've got everything broken down into segments and where the money is coming from. The last column is other reserves and capital tax levy, and it reads 21,641,360. There's no corresponding expense down below on that column. And coincidentally, our net revenue is 22,000. That same bracket is that basically the difference? What we put in reserves?
I will ask anybody that has that answer to jump in. Jazz, do you want to take lead there?
I will just start, and then if either Andrea, Noss, or Giselle want to jump in, that would be great. The purpose of the note for Schedule 23, it's ultimately asking the financial statements to represent how much of your revenue and how much of your expense is broken out in those areas listed. The other and reserves are usually potentially for grants, and you'll notice a big chunk of it is the taxation revenue as well. Andrea, did you have anything further to add?
No, I didn't. Other than I'm not sure if you want to provide more background as to why there's no expenses in the other reserves and capital tax levy column.
Somebody want to explain?
Through you, Mayor Clark. The majority of those are capital items, and so you would see that as what was contributed to what was contributed for reserves, as well as contributed towards capital. So the expenses would lie on our capital side and not directly on our operating expense side.
Great, thank you, Tim.
Okay, thanks. Well, I guess where I was going was just to the layman. Appreciate that. As I read that, it's almost like it's trying to say, okay, we have $100,000 in revenue and we have expenses of $78,000. Therefore, we have a net revenue of $22,000, but which makes you happy, a layman happy anyway. But just wondering, is that just sort of product of the fact that there is no corresponding line in the expense that matches up with the other column. And that actually it's pretty close to revenue neutral.
So through you, Mayor Clark, that is a fantastic question. Ultimately, that does represent like our annual surplus, which is often misunderstood as excess funds, but it's mainly made up of your TCAs, so your capital assets. And a small portion of it's often invested in reserves that at some point will turn into a provision for services. So although it appears to be a good news item, a surplus, it is ultimately made up of TCAs.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question, Steve, if nobody else has.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure what happened to Councillor Sepola. He's been fading in and out. Oh, he's back. Okay, good. Anyway, having said that, I will entertain any further questions, comments, discussion. Tim, please weigh back in.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Just a general overview from Jazz or Jim. These statements seem good or better. We seem to be tracking in a good direction here. There seems to be a little bit more cash around and a bit more equity, that kind of thing. Am I right or am I wrong on that?
Through you, Mayor Clark. I'd be happy to absolutely start, and then I believe Mr. Lang would like to respond as well. It's not necessarily a good or a bad position the city is in. What I would note is the statement of financial position, and that ultimately identifies our position at December 31st. And it appears our accumulated surplus is $465 million, but you'll note that's mainly made up of $412,000 of tangible capital assets. You'll also notice the big chunk of that is made up of our investment in OPCs. So ultimately, if you take that away, it's almost a net zero position. So we're not necessarily in a bad position at all, but when you look at what our accumulated surplus is made up, it gives you a better understanding of our financial position.
Just if I could jump in before Jim answers, it wasn't I was saying good, it's a great position. It's better than it was. I think it was more along what I meant. Go ahead.
So Jazz, relative, or Jim, if you want to speak to the relative positioning, that'd be great as opposed to before. Jim?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Clark. Looking at the financial statements, I think Councillor Lauer noted cash in investments are up from the previous year. That's obviously good news. At the same time, although it's not obvious in the financial statements, that is a buildup of cash that will be used for the construction of capital. We have significant capital projects that are in the works that will consume a lot of that cash. The accumulated surplus has increased. What that means is that we have built additional assets. As was mentioned earlier, that is the increase in tangible capital assets or TCAs, which you can note on the consolidated statement of financial position. So it's maybe the best way of putting it is it's the financial statements are representing exactly what we would have expected them to represent. So I don't know whether that's good news or bad news. It's exactly what we would expect. I think another note, I'm not sure how quickly I can find it, would be a comment on the reserve balances, which is something we've been focusing on very much. The statements will show an improvement in the reserve balances also. So that's some of the key areas that would very much be an example of good news, if you want to phrase it that way. Normally, we wouldn't we wouldn't describe statements in that way, but it definitely is indicating exactly what council has been planning to occur in the last few years.
Great. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Jazz and Jim. Any further questions, comments? Ralph?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The sale to Hydro One, according to the investment in Orillia Power Corporation and that, I'm just wondering, we spent about $149,000 to get to this point. Will we be able to recoup that?
Just a point of clarity, I'm going to suggest you need to add a couple of zeros onto that, or at least one more zero. Make no mistake.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's on page 15. The legal fees.
For 2019.
2019, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I was thinking of the legal fees since the beginning of the transaction, which is significantly more than the 2019 fees. But if somebody's able to answer questions about recouping, Jazz, I'll start. Oh, sorry, and then Madam CEO, if she wishes.
Through you, Mayor Clark, we do have a payable set up, and any legal fees that have been incurred as a result of the sale will be offset by the actual transaction itself. We don't have any of the details. And if Madam CEO would like to add anything further.
Madam CEO.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, the primary legal costs associated with the transaction is that they're actually being managed by Orillia Power. And with that, when we do conclude the sale, the legal costs will be taken off the overall purchase price.
Okay. Thank you.
Indeed, and thank you. Thank you for the question, Ralph. Further questions, comments, discussion? Okay, I will thank our two guests, Andrea and Giselle. Thank you very, very much for joining us again. And if our clerk's department would be so kind as to put the proposed resolution on the screen, I'll ask for a mover in a second. That this committee recommends the council to report TRES 2020 G06 dated June 30th, 2020 from the Treasury Department regarding the 2019 financial statements and audit report be received as information. Would I be able to find a mover in a second? A move by Rob, seconded by Mason. And any further questions, comments, discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. So for the benefit of those who can't read lips, I'll start that all over again. We're now on to departmental report number 2 from our Community Services Department, formerly Parks, Recreation and Culture, regarding sports pennants displayed in recreational facilities policy. And joining us for this today, I believe, is Patricia Ward. Hello, Patty. And,
hello.
And I will let you take the lead here.
Okay, through you, Mayor Clark, the report requests the creation of a policy for displaying sports pennants within recreation facilities. The policy will provide fair and consistent representation for all groups utilizing the facilities, ensure that the pennants are kept in good, safe state of repair, and provide options to display awards in digital media form. This is consistent with similar policies found through benchmarking.
Thank you very much. And I will, I do appreciate the report. I think it is fairly straightforward, but I'll see if there's any discussion around this. Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Jay and then Tim.
Thanks. Through the chair, this is more just kind of a point of curiosity. I was wondering, do you ever are there any examples where there are teams that have kind of folded or that aren't ongoing in Orillia, but that we do hold on to the pennant just kind of for a historical purpose?
If you're able to answer that.
Through your Mayor Clark, I believe we do still have some existing in the arena from teams that have folded. So we would keep them until space allows or until they're not of a good enough state of repair to remain up.
Thanks very much.
Tim and then Pat.
Hi, Patty. Whenever I see a policy brought in, I often think that it's in response to a problem. Were we having some problems, or were there a lot of disputes and iffy situations, or is this just being proactive?
Through you, Mayor Clark, this is actually just us being proactive. It's something that historically we have followed these very similar patterns. But with the Orillia Recreation Center opening, we felt that there might be several more requests and it might be easier to have a straight policy to follow.
Thank you. Thank you both. The other Patricia.
Good day, Patty. Excuse me. So where would you hang the pennants for the channel cats as an example?
Through you, Mayor Clark, we have not selected precise locations within the new facility yet. We will work that out as what works well with the groups and with the location. There is a lot of glass, so there isn't a lot of wall space to work with there.
Thank you.
And thank you. I have a couple of comments from the chair, if council will allow me. Patty has been employed by the city for 31 years. She has developed great relationships with many of the user groups within the city, and I've witnessed positive feedback to my office about those relationships over the years that I've been involved. Many positive comments. One thing she's known for saying is, "I'm here. How can I help?" That kind of work ethic. And I'm also led to believe that she treats everybody equally and evenly, and despite the user group being represented. And so, Patty, if council will indulge me, I've got something here for you because I know this is your last official work week. And to Patty Ward, Recreation Policy and Permitting Supervisor for 31 years of dedicated service. Congratulations on a long and distinguished career. On behalf of members of council and staff, I extend our appreciation for your dedication and loyal service to our Sunshine City. You've been a great ambassador for the city. Your professionalism and friendship will most assuredly be missed within parks, recreation, and culture, and well beyond. Anyway, Patty, all the best. And for a long and happy retirement.
Thank you.
And I may have been put up to that by the guy who's your boss for a few more days. Anyway, Patty, glad to be a very small part. Glad to be a very small part of a wonderful celebration. And a deserved celebration, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
And with that being said, I will ask our clerk's department to put the resolution up on the screen, and we'll conduct some business. This committee recommends the council that is recommended in report CSD 2005 dated July 14th, 2020 from the Community Services Department, policy 7.1.7.2. Sports pennants displayed in recreational facilities be adopted as set out as in Schedule A of the aforementioned report. Any further questions, comments? We'll call the question. All in favor? Sorry? Oh, sorry, I need a mover and a seconder. Very sorry. Moved by Ted, seconded by Dave. Is that all right? Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried twice. Thank you, and thank you, Patty. Ralph, on process?
Yes, just a question of staff. When this COVID-19 is all over, will we be able to have a sort of a retirement reception for those of that are retiring, like Jim, Patty, and maybe a few more in the meantime? Will we be able to do that?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to put somebody in the hot seat for that question. I think anything's possible, Ralph. We could certainly take anything under advisement. Madam CAO, do you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. We've had some fantastic people retire over the last few months, and certainly some more pending retirements. And whenever possible, we will want to do a celebration to honor the significant commitment that they've made to our city. Just depending on when we can do that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for that. Now on to departmental report number 3 with respect to industrial waste surcharge agreement, which we have with some of our businesses throughout the city, depending on the nature of their business. And I see that we have a couple of invited, so non-interlopers, Mr. Shell and Ms. Rakowski. And who is taking the lead on this? It looks like I see a green microphone on from Andrew. Andrew, all yours.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor Clark, to the members of council, I do have Renee Rakowski with us. She has authored the next 2 reports. So I'm going to let her do the introductions, and we'll both be available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And Renee, the chamber is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Report number EIS 2008 before you today seeks council's authorization to enter into an industrial waste surcharge agreement with Orillia Brewing Company, Inc., operating as Couchiching Brewing for their operations at 162 Mississauga Street East. The city has been working cooperatively with Couchiching Brewing for the past several years with an end goal of responsibly managing the wastewater generated by the brewing operations. Couchiching Brewing has gone to great lengths to design, install, and now maintain an on-site treatment system. Even with the system in place, the wastewater generated by the brewery exceeds the city's Chapter 1047 limits for biochemical oxygen demand. The agreement will allow the city to recover revenue from Couchiching Brewing to cover the costs associated with treating the wastewater at the city's wastewater treatment center. The city's wastewater treatment center operates in full compliance with the ministry's limits for biochemical oxygen demand, and it will continue to do so with the establishment of this agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Renee. It's appreciated. And I think there's some excitement around the opening of the Couchiching Brewery as well. So I'm sure it's always better or easier to report or put a report together around something such as a brewery. Anyway, with that being said, I will now open the floor for questions or comments. Ralph and then Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. Microplastics. I'm not sure if they're being produced with this or whatever, but I'm understanding that the latest scientific evidence says that the microplastics are filtering into our water, and that. Does this affect that at all?
I'm not, yeah, I think I'll let Renee answer that. I had a comment, but go ahead, Renee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our examination of the brewery's wastewater has not been focused at all on the microplastics. We've been more concerned with the traditional brewery parameters of concern for this operation. So it wasn't something that was looked at for the brewery, and it's not something with a standard in place to my knowledge.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Supplementary. I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to find out if we can monitor microplastics coming into our drinking water from the lake and all that? I mean, this is a great opportunity, and I totally support the brewery. I'm just wondering if we should do a study or environmental study of these microplastics that are floating, going into our lake and into our drinking water, because we get our drinking water from the lake.
Ralph, I think your questions and concern around microplastics are admirable. I think it is a hot button topic, not just for Orillia and Lake Simcoe and Lake Couchiching, and by extension our natural environment and our drinking water. But I think that question will probably be better asked in a slightly different forum, because I don't think it has anything to do with the report before us, as much as it is a very important question.
Okay, thank you. I'll figure something else out.
Well, indeed, thank you. And of course, we still have a report at some point with single-use plastics as well, which can often break down into microplastics, of course. Anyway, having said that, any further? Oh, sorry, I think I had Jay in queue. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Thanks. I've got a snide remark and then a question. My snide remark is, if you want to divert the excess beer water to my house, I'm more than happy to accommodate. The other question was, is like under COVID, I assume they're anticipating production numbers to be different. Are we anticipating post-COVID that the amount of wastewater coming from the brewery to change in any way?
I'm going to guess that the brewery hopes that's the case, but Renee, you have a comment?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question, and it's something that we've been working closely with the brewery on in the last couple months specifically. They do anticipate that their brewing operations will continue to ramp up. I think they've been very successful despite opening amongst COVID, so it's a great testament to their business, but we do anticipate there to be more volume generated. Our agreement is tied to the volume of water that they consume. So as they consume more water and generate more wastewater, we'll be able to recover more expenses associated with that high strength wastewater. So it does allow for that in the future. So we're not tied to a fixed consumption at this point. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Renee.
That's great. Thank you for the question, and equally thank you for the answer. Any further questions, comments? I will now ask. Did we put that on the screen already? No, I'll put it on the screen, and then we'll. I say I. Of course, I have nothing to do with that. But great timing by staff with the electronics, by the way. That this committee recommends the council as recommended in report EIS 2008 dated July 10th, 2020, from the Environment and Infrastructure Services Department, the mayor and clerk, sometimes pronounced Clark, be authorized to execute an industrial waste surcharge agreement with Orillia Brewing Company, Inc., operating as Couchiching Brewing Company, effective September 15th, 2020, or later at the discretion of the city. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Pat and Rob. Moved by Pat, seconded by Rob. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. That is passed. Thank you. And I see that our guests are not disappearing for good cause or with good cause.
So report EIS 2009 before you today seeks council's approval to increase the overall capital budget allocation for the water filtration plant fencing project by $11,400. This would allow the city to award the tender to DC Fence and Contracting, Inc. to supply and install fencing and gates at the water filtration plant and supporting buildings. There have been a number of security concerns and vandalism concerns at the facility, which prompted the 2020 capital budget request. We report to date in 2020, these concerns have been ongoing. DC Fence and Contracting was the lowest price tender submission received through an open competitive tender process undertaken by the city in June. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I do know that we had a bit of an incursion by somebody a few years ago. We found them inside the perimeter of the wastewater exterior. Anyway, any questions or comments for Renee and or Andrew? Patricia.
So I'm guessing that the fence would enclose all the buildings completely so people couldn't get close to them. Would that be correct?
Yes, that would be correct. Where the water filtration, oh, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry about that. Where the water filtration plant is located, it borders on the water, obviously. So the fencing would go down in close proximity to the shoreline, but it would greatly improve the security at the facility and restrict the number of people that can access that facility exterior.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Anybody else? I will now ask staff to put the proposed resolution on the screen. That this committee recommends the council, as recommended in report EIS 2009, dated July 10th, 2020 from the Environmental and Infrastructure Services Department, DC Fence and Contracting, Inc., be awarded contract EIS PES 2005 to supply and install fencing and gates at the water filtration plant and ancillary buildings for the tendered amount or sum of $43,888.75 plus HST. And the overall budget allocation for the water filtration plant fencing project be increased from $40,000 to $51,400 net of HST, with the additional funding in the amount of $11,400 to be allocated from the water and wastewater reserve, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement. Is there a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor? Moved by Mason, seconded by Ralph. Thank you. Any further discussion? These must be two very succinct reports. I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Renee. Thank you. That concludes our departmental reports. And we do have one inquiry proposed resolution to be introduced by Councillor Follis, but I believe there may be a slight change to this. So I will let Jay speak to that. Jay, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I just had a prepared statement here on this. When I was very young, I remember very vividly playing in a sandbox at a playground with my sister. And while we were there, she found a used and broken needle in the sand. And luckily, my mom was there and took us away very quickly. And afterward, we learned how serious this was and the health implications. And so fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, and I had a complaint brought forward to me that made me instantly think of this story, that the individual that came forward basically suggested that while kids were playing at one of the city playgrounds, they found a needle. And for a second, I became my 10-year-old self again and wanted to see an immediate solution. So since talking with staff, I have become aware of many instances across the city of this occurring, and the implications, of course, are very serious. The reality is we're not going to be able to prevent every single needle from being in the wrong place, but installing disposable bins in some of these parks, I think, could be a very meaningful way to help to address the situation. And so we've got an inquiry on the agenda there. I'm going to ask that it be just changed a bit, and staff will probably have exact wording, but basically the premise being that we look at the feasibility of installing sharp disposal bins at Couchiching Beach Park, Tudhope Park, as well as any parks that city staff deem to be of high risk. leaving it open for staff to look at any other potential areas. And just in talking with staff, it sounds as if that would, I'd hate to kind of restrict them to those two parks. I think it is beneficial to give them a little bit of leeway there to make that decision. So that was kind of the proposal and the reasoning behind it. And I do hope council supports it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay. I will ask staff to wordsmith that to reflect the councillor's request, and then we'll put on the screen, and I'll look for, I presume, Jay, you probably are amenable to being a mover. This committee recommends to council that staff be directed to prepare a report with respect to the following: the feasibility of installing Sharps disposal bins at Couchiching Beach Park, JB Tudhope Memorial Park, and other appropriate parks. Just one question from the chair. Is Sharps not a brand name, or is it a type of bin disposal?
Sorry,
okay,
I couldn't hear the question, Steve.
Well, it turns out that the question really is irrelevant and immaterial. So your motion stands as worded.
Okay.
So Jay, assuming that you are the mover, is there a seconder? I'll second it. If Pat. Okay, Pat. So moved by Jay, seconded by Pat, and I will entertain any further discussion, questions, comments. Thank you. Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Merkley. We talked about this at Canada Fire, but now that the policy has come up, the last reports we did, that you're going to, from the sand that's in some of the playground, you're going to put solid ground on them, that these needles cannot penetrate the sand and everything else. So is it still necessary to do that? Because I don't think somebody's got a needle, they're going to go throw them all over the parks. I support it, but I'm just wondering if it's necessary to put it close to playground areas where the sand, people were throwing them in the sand. I think Caniff Park is probably a best example. I've talked to you about it before.
Ray, sorry, who would we direct that to?
It'll be Andrew.
Oh, Jay, go ahead.
I'm sure Andrew or Ray would have something to add to this, but I was kind of the mentality being that anywhere in the park they can be used and disposed of, and certainly Tudhope. I think part of the reason that Tudhope and Cooch are listed is because they have beach frontage there as well with the sand. But certainly anywhere in various parks, this could be a potential issue. And my understanding is sometimes you'll see it in bathrooms as well, that they'll just be left in the garbage or left around. So that's kind of something to take into consideration as well. That's kind of the layman's, or the simple answer, I guess.
Thank you. Andrew, I did see you on the screen. Did you wish to address that?
Sure. Through you, Mayor Clark. Certainly the validity of the request is there. One of the biggest challenges I think that we've looked at over the years is the potential when you just have a Sharps container, which is, there's a lot of them that are not very protective, so that you can actually damage them. Somebody can take them down, damage them, and actually get into those needles. So the concern typically was around the potential that younger children potentially, or somebody may damage those, then the needles are all over, or a child, if they were to break into those, they're typically a plastic type unit, would actually create more of a potential for the young and for obviously anybody that comes in contact. That being said, just agree 100% with Councillor Sapola. As we move forward, we certainly will be having more surfaces that are less permeable. And ultimately what we currently do now, staff always have sharps containers in their vehicles. So the park staff are all able to pick those up as they're doing their maintenance throughout the park system. So that's the typical reason they have not been installed previously.
Thank you very much for that. Any further? Oh, Ralph, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. My concern is that people will break into them and think that there's some drug left in the needle, and they will take it. Those that are addicted to it, they will break the box apart and try and take the needle. And if there's maybe a little drop left in it, they'll try and puncture their own, and that may create a problem for us from a liability point of view and also from a health point of view, that they'll break into it and utilize what they'll think that there's some left of the drug in the needle. And as much as I'd like to support, unless we can get one that's completely safe. And where do you put them in the park? Do you put them in near playgrounds? Do you put them near sand? I have some concern with staff taking so much time to look into this and everything else, especially at this time.
Thank you. I've got Mason and Tim in queue. That's Jay. You want to answer that directly? Then I'll go to Mason and Tim.
Just a quick comment. I think likely where the potential would be to place them would be inside washrooms. So probably wouldn't be like sitting on a pole next to a park necessarily, but relatively close by.
Thank you. Mason.
Perfect. Yeah, through you, Mayor Clark, not to weigh into the debate or anything, but I just wanted to make council aware of that we already do have some sharps in municipal facilities. For example, if anyone's been in the washroom at the library, there is a sharps disposable in the library washroom. So we do have them in municipal facilities, and to my knowledge, being on the library board, I haven't heard of any issues with people breaking them apart, trying to get any drugs out of them or anything like that. So I don't see that as a big concern.
Thank you. Certainly they have them at the Y and other facilities as well. Tim, then Pat, quickly.
Thanks, Steve. I will be supporting this inquiry. I think it's a great question to ask, and the information we need. I think there's no point in trying to solve the issue at this particular meeting. All that's being requested is information from staff who will do some research and bring that forward. So I certainly think it's an important question. I will be supporting this inquiry.
Thank you, Pat and Ted.
I would remind my colleagues, excuse me, that the inquiry motion is for the feasibility of doing this, not should we do it. So I don't see any problem in supporting it and finding out the information.
Thank you very much. Ted?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I just want to point out that it's not only the problem of drug addicts, but diabetics could find this an attractive help to their illness as well.
I think it's a valuable input. Seeing no other hands in the air, I have read the motion and moved by Jay and seconded by Pat, I believe. I think Ms. Williams has been taking handwriting lessons, cursive lessons from the mayor. Anyway, any further discussion on the motion? I'll now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have so we'll move into open public forum. I'm going to ask everybody to, some decorum, make your way down to the microphone. Anyway, and Ms. Williams, did we receive any?
No, Mayor Clark.
Thank you very much. So no request for open public forum. In that case, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, and then we'll go right into a council meeting. That's okay. Moved by Mason, seconded by Tim. All in favor? Carried. Yeah, sorry, it's going to take staff about 5 or 6 minutes. Is that right? So at 5:05, we'll reconvene if that's all right with everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
4 and 6 and 2, 4, 6, 7. I'm waiting for Rob. Robert, are you thereabouts? Put your hand out of the cookie jar and get back in the den. Or get one for the whole class. All right, well, I will call the meeting to order. Rob, I'm sure will join us momentarily. As council, sorry, that's not it. This regular council meeting for Monday, July 20th, this very day, 2020. What's that? Oh, maybe it's me that's missing. Sorry, gang, I could hear my voice because I'm right here, but I didn't know my camera was not. So I will call the meeting to order, regular meeting of council, and ask staff to queue us up with our national anthem. See if I can adjust the screen so it's not staring at my pocket.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
In case, we'll just take a moment of quiet reflection. Thank you. Now, before I ask for an approval of the agenda, I would like to ask council to consider waiving notice of motion so that we can introduce a bylaw that would, under the COVID heading, that would allow our staff to essentially empower our fire chief to be able to help with enforcement in the parks around, particularly around barbecues, although the authority would actually and essentially give him the powers of a bylaw officer. And there are, as part of my education, some of those examples within the city already, and particularly, I think, within the fire department and our engineering department. But so with that proposed, with that suggestion, would somebody please make a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Ted, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest based on the material before you, Jay?
Yeah, I have to disclose a conflict in regards to bylaw 2020-62, as I am a sessional professor at Georgian.
I appreciate that, and thank you for declaring this the nature of the conflict. Excuse me, that'll be so reflected. I guess staff will fill that out now because we. Okay. Okay. So Jay, at some point when you make a physical appearance at City Hall, we'll get you to sign off on that. But it's so noted. We don't have any presentations or deputations that I'm aware of, but with respect to the minutes of June 15th, 2020 regular meeting of council, June 18th, 2020 special council meeting, repatio and public realm project, July 2nd, 2020 special council meeting regarding phase 2 of the public realm project and waterfront parking and boat launch access, and July 10th, 2020 special council meeting regarding Orillia Power Corporation generation opportunity. Is there a mover and a seconder to put those on the floor? Moved by Pat, seconded by Ralph. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried, thank you. No correspondence under reports. We have one from Budget Committee, which we put forth last week. And I will ask staff to put that on the screen. And there it is before you. That encapsulates the motion that we read last week. I think, so I'll read it and then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. That report number 2020 -2 of Budget Committee now before council be adopted. And just for those watching at home, this essentially moves the resolution, if it's successful, forward that was brought forward to Budget Committee last week. Anyway, with that being said, is there a mover and a seconder? Moved by Tim, seconded by Ted. Sorry, you're not moving it. Tim?
Sorry, Steve, a point of order. I'm just wondering if clause 1 can be separated, or do we have to vote, if we're voting against this, do we have to vote for the whole, against the whole thing?
I will refer to our capable staff. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through you, now would be the point in time to separate that clause, item 1, for a separate vote.
If that's the case, I'd like it separated.
Now, just to be clear, does he need a seconder to separate that, or is it just a verbal request?
There will be a motion to adopt the report from Budget Committee with the exception of the clause. So you will need a mover and seconder to separate that item from the report.
Okay, so before I need to discern that now, I would assume yes. Okay. Is there a mover? Sorry, Tim, I assume that you're the mover. Is there a seconder to separate clause 1? Moved by Tim, seconded by Rob. And so therefore, the motion now reads, moved by, that report number 2022 Budget Committee now before council be adopted with the exception of clause 1, which shall be introduced separately. Is there a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor? Moved by Ted, seconded by Mason. And any further discussion on the rest of the clauses in this motion? I will call the question. All in favor? Hold those hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that's carried. Thank you. And now we'll deal with clause 1. And I'll ask that it appear on the screen. You guys are doing an amazing job with the timing on that, by the way. That clause 1 of report number 2020-2 of Budget Committee now before council be adopted. A mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. Moved by Ted, seconded by David. And further discussion. Mason and then Tim.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I will not be supporting this clause moving forward, but I will save everybody the time and I won't rehash my comments from last week, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much, Mason. Appreciate it. Tim?
Ditto here. I'm not interested in restating all the reasons I'm against this, but I will not be supporting it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Jay.
Thanks. Through the chair, I am very hesitantly going to vote against this. I think ultimately we can do a lot more with the the collective plate than what it's going to mean to the individuals, but I do recognize the value of going to a 0% rate. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Thank you, and your thoughts are appreciated, especially when they're verbally articulated. Any further questions, comments? I will now call the question. All in favor? And that is carried.
Sorry, Mayor Clark, I'm just on my phone. Is there any way we could get a recorded vote on that one?
The answer is absolutely. So we'll ask staff to queue us up for that.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. A recorded vote has been requested. When I say your name, please say yes or no. I will begin with Councillor Ainsworth.
No.
Councillor Emond.
Yes.
Councillor Fallis.
Nay.
Councillor Heen.
Sorry, that was nay. Sorry, Jay, that was a nay or no?
Sorry, that was a nay. Apologies.
Thank you.
Councillor Heen.
Yes.
Councillor Cipolla.
Yes.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes.
Councillor Klustra.
No.
Councillor Lauer.
No.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Clark, there are 5 yeas and 4 nays. The motion is carried.
I will say that I appreciated the discussion at Budget Committee last week, and certainly the comments made around which direction to go with that, no matter what the direction was in the end. Okay. Under motions, we do have what notice of motion? Or is that under bylaws all of a sudden? Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Sorry, we have council, the report that the council put together, staff put together between our council committee meeting and this meeting. And so I'll ask that that resolution to be shown on the screen. Look at you guys go. That report number 2020-9 of council committee now before council be adopted. Is there a mover and a seconder to move the stuff forward from council committee? Moved by Dave, seconded by Pat. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Carried, thank you. So although we did have a waiver of notice of motion, that it is about regarding a bylaw, so that will show up in their bylaws. So therefore, we have no formal notices of motion or deputation motions, and nor consent agenda items. But we are now into bylaws, and we're dealing with these 1 to 2. So I'll have the first bylaw come up on the screen, please. That bylaw number 20 is 2020-62, a bylaw to provide for the levying of an. Oh yeah, thank you, Jay. This is where you. Thank you for that, Jay. Bylaw number 2020-62, a bylaw to provide for the levying of an annual tax payable upon university, college, and a public hospital for the year 2020 be enacted. Any questions, comments, discussion? So Rob stepped away too. I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Ted, seconded by Pat. Any further discussion on on this particular taxation bylaw? And I'll just give Rob a chance over there. No further discussion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Welcome back, Jay. We have bylaw number 2020-63, a bylaw to provide that blocks 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, and 14 unregistered plan 51M, 1159 Churchley subdivision phase 2B are not subject to part lot control under the Planning Act, Land and Homes Churchley Inc. Excuse me, with respect to numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19 to 40, 42, and 44 Churchley Mews. As well as bylaw number 2020-64, a bylaw to approve the submission of an application to Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation, OILC, for the long-term financing of a certain capital work or works of the Corporation of the City of Orillia, the municipality, and to authorize the entering into a rate offer letter of agreement pursuant to which the municipality will issue debentures to OILC. Questions, comments? Tim?
Sorry, Mayor Clark, I wonder if, could somebody just explain that second bylaw to me?
Indeed, but it won't be me. Mr. Lang or Ms. Radigan? Jim or Jazz, are you in the hood? There we are. Hello.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Clark. This bylaw represents the city to go into an agreement with IO for allowing us to debenture the LED street lighting project. Ultimately, those bylaws were templates provided by IO, and they've gone to Infrastructure Ontario's legal as well. So this is just the first step of proceeding with the debenture with IO.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Any further questions, comments, discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, mover and a seconder. I seem to want to cut to the chase also. I moved by Rob, seconded by Ralph. Thank you. Any further discussion? I will now call the question officially. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Just we're doing.
That's right. It's not debate.
Thank you. We're now on to the issue that I mentioned under approval of agenda. So I will read it in a moment. Just a reminder, this waiver, notice to waive motion is not debatable. The debatable portion will be under, if this is successful, will be whether to allow the bylaw to go ahead and essentially deputize, I'm probably using the wrong term, I'm sure, but authorize our fire chief to have those that ability to enforce bylaws. So to be carried by 2/3 of members of council, that in accordance to section 22.9.3 of chapter 22 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, notice of motion, new matter, council hereby waive notice to enable a motion to be introduced under the bylaws section of the agenda with respect to the appointment of the fire chief as a municipal law enforcement officer. Is there any, sorry, I need a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. Moved by Rob and seconded by Pat. Thank you. Any, well, no discussion, I'm afraid. I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so that is passed. So now we will I'll ask staff to put on the proposed bylaw on our screen. And then I'll look for a mover and a seconder. That bylaw 2020-65 being a bylaw to amend Chapter 170 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer be enacted. This bylaw appoints Brent Thomas as a Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer in accordance with the Police Services Act, RSO 1990 CP 15 S 15. Is there a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor? Moved by Rob, seconded by David. Thank you. And discussion. Ted?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Are we authorizing just Brent to be a bylaw officer, or are we authorizing members of the fire service to serve in that capacity?
I think I'll let Madam CAO weigh in. She's much more familiar with the setup that exists in the city than I. Madam CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. At this point, this bylaw essentially appoints the fire chief and the fire chief alone. We do have fire prevention officers that are already appointed. The EMC met this afternoon, and what we came to the conclusion of was that all hands on deck, and our fire chief is out in the park system on a fairly regular basis and has been dealing with folks with respect to the operation of barbecues within our park system. So this would just simply enable the fire chief to issue a ticket if in fact a ticket is warranted. But at this stage, it is just appointing the fire chief. We just thought that due to the timing of the council meeting and the timing of the overall, some of the issues that we're having within the park, that again, sort of all hands on deck, additional ability to lay charges will be as a result of Mr. Thomas being appointed as a municipal law enforcement officer. We do have several other staff that are appointed as well as part of this process that certainly act in the capacity of law enforcement as well.
Thank you for that. Yes, and there are other members of the fire department and other members of different departments that have the same ability. Ted, as a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clark. It was just personal observation on the weekend that obviously enforcement is a challenge to us, and I just wanted to ensure that we were delegating enough members of staff to manage across the spectrum. I assume that the MC has dealt with that this afternoon, and I look forward to the report coming out tonight, which I'm sure will enlighten us on how we're going to go forward with that. So.
Great. Sorry, Tim, did I see your hand in the air a moment ago?
You did.
Down, and then I'll go to Pat and Ralph.
Just along the discussion of capacity, can anybody give us an update on how the weekend went?
Yeah, I'm just curious if that's germane to the motion. I suppose that if it could affect your ability to decide to support this or not, based on the park traffic, I will allow the question. Who is Sean on? Well, I could take a stool. Okay, Madam CEO, go right ahead.
Through Mr. Mayor, I will start, and then I believe Ms. Ruff is also part, she's included in this meeting and part of the EMC. Staff are actually meeting tomorrow to go through all the details related to this weekend's activities. Some of the primary challenges that we were faced with certainly would be the parking along the highway, as well as the parking within the private lots in and around Tutto Park and Couchiching Beach Park. Those property owners have been, certainly we've reached out to those property owners, and part of tomorrow's discussion is to talk about sort of next steps. Overall, the program has been very busy. There has been about just over 6,000 resident permits issued. And with that, the residents essentially are quite pleased with the overall process. Saturday was a challenge in terms of the number of people that came into our community. And certainly the parking was again a challenge. And what we'll do as part of our discussion tomorrow is we'll provide council with a further update via CIP motion to talk about some of the solutions that we will have with respect to some of the challenges.
I would just add that, yeah, we've seen a reduction in overall traffic the last couple of weekends. Certainly an exception was this past Saturday with ideal weather, and certainly people trying to getting very creative. So needless to say, there are a few issues that Madam CEO has mentioned, and the purpose of that meeting tomorrow that staff are having is to drill down into possible solutions that can be enacted for this coming Thursday. So needless to say, we're not where we need to be yet with measures, and we'll look to turn that around for the weekend. And if that doesn't work, then we'll look at other measures because it needs to be brought under control. JR, did you wish to add anything else to that, or Brent? Okay. Ralph. Sorry, Pat, then Ralph. Sorry, Pat.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is, how much is the ticket if you do use a barbecue in the park?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I know we just upped our fines for parking infractions at JR. Ms. Ruff?
Through you, Mayor Clark, the fine through the parks bylaw is $300. And that's what we've been letting people know.
And how can we be assured that it will be paid, or it's just not thrown into a pile somewhere?
That belongs to the court system, but JR or Madam, elaborate on that.
Mr. Mayor, it is a Provincial Offences Act offense, and consequently is filed with the court system, and there is certainly a process through the court system to ensure payment.
Great. Thank you, Madam CEO. Thank you, JR. And
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Saturday, I walked around Couchimbeach Park with Al LaFontaine, and there's some serious problems down there on Saturday. I think we all know what they are. And one of the questions I'd like to ask our CAO is it possible to consider hiring a security officers for Saturday and Sunday only to be in the park, dressed as officers or whatever their gear is, or use volunteer constables from the OPP to patrol the park? There was more cigarette butts in the park than you can shake a stick at, especially around the amphitheater. And Jay, you talk about needles there around behind the amphitheater. There was a few, and there's a lady that's homeless, and I think Ted, we had our meeting this morning, and Ted might be able to explain it a little better than I can. But there was a lady there that's been there since May, I think, by the stand there.
Ralph, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your conversation to the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering through you, the CAO, if it's possible to, because of the problems hiring security officers in the park.
Well, that is a question that could be asked. I'm not sure if it's germane to the bylaw before you, but anyway, well, Ralph, I'm very sorry, but Robert's rules are written a certain way, and if you've got a motion to bring it forward, like Jay did with an inquiry earlier, that's certainly you're right. Or you could even actually, Ralph, if you wish, actually, I will take that under advisement and ask the group that's meeting tomorrow to contemplate that. So I'm glad to do that. Ted?
That's what I was asking, Mr. Mayor, that I don't want it on today's agenda.
Mayor Clark, just for information, we did receive correspondence at the RTF meeting this morning from the Chamber of Commerce, indicated that it wasn't our matter to deal with directly, and that correspondence was forwarded on to the AMC.
If it's part of the correspondence from the Chamber, then indeed it'll be on the EMC agenda for tomorrow. Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion with respect to the bylaw, proposed bylaw? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, I believe that, we need one more confirming bylaw. The bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at this very meeting held on this very day, July 20th, 2020. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Dave, seconded by Pat. And any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any announcements? Thank you. Okay. Open public forum, Ms. Williams, did we receive anything since council committee?
No, Mayor Clark.
Thank you very much, and thank you for checking. And certainly thanks to you and Robin for very slick and seamless electronic moving of putting the motions forward and backwards. Thank you for that. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mason, seconded by Ralph. All in favor? Thank you, gang. Have a wonderful night. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.